The phone buzzed on Paige Morrison's desk for the third time in 5 minutes, and she wanted to throw it across the cafe's back office. Her best friend Mia had been sending increasingly frantic messages about some job opportunity, but Paige had her hands full with the lunch rush and a broken espresso machine that was currently spewing steam like an angry dragon. Paige. Mia burst through the door, her heels clicking against the tile floor. "Why aren't you answering your phone?" "Because I'm working." Paige gestured at the chaos visible through the office window. The cafe was packed, customers lined up 10 deep, and she was down 2 baristas who had called in sick. "Whatever it is, can it wait?" "No, it absolutely cannot." Mia grabbed Paige's shoulders, her eyes wide with excitement. "My boss needs someone for a special project. It pays $50,000 for 3 months of work." Paige froze, her hand halfway to her apron strings. 50,000. "Mia, that's not funny." "I'm not joking. Julian Reeves, the CEO of Reeves Industries, needs someone to pretend to be his girlfriend for 3 months. His grandmother is threatening to cut him out of the family trust if he doesn't settle down, and he needs someone who can play the part convincingly." The name registered somewhere in Paige's brain. Julian Reeves was one of those tech billionaires who occasionally graced the cover of business magazines, usually looking brooding and impossibly handsome in expensive suits. She'd seen his face on the news when his company had launched some revolutionary software platform last year. "That's insane." "Why me?" "Because you're perfect. You're genuine, you're smart, and you won't fall for his money or status. Plus, you desperately need the cash." Paige wanted to argue, but Mia wasn't wrong. The cafe barely broke even most months, and she'd been dipping into her savings to keep it afloat. $50,000 would solve every financial problem she had and give her breathing room to actually grow the business. "This sounds like something out of a bad movie," Paige said, but her resolve was already weakening. "Meet him tonight. Just hear him out. What's the worst that could happen?" 6 hours later, Paige found herself sitting in a private room at one of Manhattan's most exclusive restaurants, smoothing down her only decent dress and wondering what she'd gotten herself into. The door opened, and Julian Reeves walked in, and Paige understood immediately why women threw themselves at him. He was tall, probably 6'3", with dark hair that looked professionally styled but also like he'd been running his hands through it. His suit probably cost more than her monthly rent, fitted perfectly across broad shoulders. But it was his eyes that caught her off guard, a striking gray that seemed to look right through her. "Miss Morrison." His voice was deep, authoritative. He extended his hand, and his grip was firm but not crushing. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Reeves. Julian, please." He sat down across from her, and a waiter appeared immediately with wine. Julian waved him away. "I assume Mia explained the situation." "She said your grandmother is blackmailing you into finding a girlfriend." A flicker of amusement crossed his face. "That's one way to put it. My grandmother believes I'm too focused on work and not enough on building a life. She's threatening to transfer her 40% stake in the company to my cousin unless I prove I'm capable of maintaining a stable relationship." "Why fake it? Why not just find someone real?" "Because I don't have time for real." He leaned back, his posture relaxed but his eyes intense. "I work 90 hours a week. I'm in the middle of negotiations for the biggest acquisition of my career. A real relationship would require attention and emotional investment I can't spare right now. But I need my grandmother to back off for 3 months until the deal closes and her share transfer deadline passes." Paige studied him, looking for signs of the arrogance she'd expected. Instead, she saw exhaustion under the polished exterior, tension in the line of his jaw. "What would this involve?" public appearances, family dinners. You need to move into my penthouse to make it convincing. My grandmother is sharp and she'll be watching closely. In return, $50,000, all expenses paid, and a clean break after 3 months with excellent references for whatever you want to do next. Move in with you. I have 4 guest rooms. You'd have complete privacy. I'm rarely home anyway. Paige should have said no. Every rational part of her brain screamed that this was a terrible idea. But she thought about the cafe, about the stack of bills in her desk drawer, about the dreams she'd put on hold because she was always one bad month away from disaster. I want $60,000, she heard herself say. Julian's eyebrows rose. 55, and I'll cover any personal expenses you incur during this arrangement. Deal. They shook on it, and Paige felt like she just stepped off a cliff, unsure if she was flying or falling. The next 3 days passed in a whirlwind. Julian's assistant, a terrifyingly efficient woman named Sandra, appeared at Paige's apartment with contracts, non-disclosure agreements, and a schedule that made Paige's head spin. She had 24 hours to pack up her essentials, brief her assistant manager at the cafe, and prepare to move into a world completely foreign to her. Julian's penthouse occupied the top floor of a building in Tribeca. All floor-to-ceiling windows and minimalist furniture that probably cost more than her car. Sandra gave her a quick tour, pointing out the kitchen, the gym, the media room before showing her to a bedroom that was bigger than her entire apartment. Mr. Reeves is in Tokyo until tomorrow, Sandra said crisply. He'll expect you at dinner with his grandmother on Friday. A stylist will come by Thursday to help you select appropriate attire. Do you have any questions? About 1 million, but Paige just shook her head. The penthouse was beautiful and utterly impersonal. Paige wandered through the space after Sandra left, finding no photographs, no personal touches, nothing that suggested anyone actually lived here. Julian's home office was the only room that showed signs of life, papers scattered across the desk, a coffee mug with cold dregs sitting on a coaster. She spent Wednesday at the cafe, training Marcus on how to handle things in her absence. She'd still come in when she could, but the next 3 months would be unpredictable. That evening she returned to find Julian standing in the kitchen, tie loosened, exhaustion evident in every line of his body. "You're back early," Paige said. "Meetings finished faster than expected." He pulled a bottle of water from the fridge. "How are you settling in? It's beautiful." "Very different from my place." Which was a 5th-floor walk-up in Queens with questionable plumbing and neighbors who think 3 a.m. is a great time for drum practice. The corner of his mouth twitched. This must be an improvement then. The view alone is worth it. They stood in awkward silence for a moment. This was the man she'd be pretending to love for the next 3 months, and Paige realized she knew absolutely nothing about him beyond what Google had told her. He'd built Reeves Industries from nothing after dropping out of Princeton at 20, turning a simple project management app into a multi-billion-dollar enterprise. He was 32, never married, rarely photographed at social events. "We should probably get to know each other," Julian said, echoing her thoughts. "My grandmother will ask questions." They ended up on opposite ends of the massive leather couch, Julian with his water, Paige with tea she'd made in the intimidatingly high-tech kitchen. He asked about her cafe, and Paige found herself talking about how she'd bought it 3 years ago with money her father had left her, how she'd nearly run it into the ground the first year before figuring out what she was doing. "You said you work 90 hours a week," Paige said. "What do you do when you're not working?" "Sleep. Sometimes." "That's not healthy," says the woman who just admitted she pulled 3 all-nighters last month doing inventory and bookkeeping. "That's different. I love what I do." "So do I." But he said it automatically, and Paige wondered if it was true or just something he'd told himself so many times he believed it. Thursday brought the stylist, a woman named Veronica who looked Paige up and down with a critical eye before declaring her salvageable. 4 hours later, Paige barely recognized herself in the mirror. The dress was midnight blue, elegant without being flashy, fitted in ways that made her actually look like she belonged in Julian's world. "His grandmother is old money," Veronica said, adjusting Paige's hair. "She'll be looking for someone who doesn't try too hard. You want to look comfortable, confident, like you're not impressed by wealth because you're secure in yourself. No pressure then." Friday evening, Paige stood in front of the mirror in that blue dress, her hands shaking slightly as she fastened her earrings. She'd grown up middle class, worked her way through college at 3 different restaurants. She didn't know the first thing about navigating the world of billionaires and family trusts. Julian emerged from his room in a charcoal suit, and Paige hated that her heart did a small flip. This wasn't real, she reminded herself. This was business. "You look beautiful," he said, and it sounded genuine. "You clean up okay yourself." His driver took them to an Upper East Side mansion that looked like something from a historical drama. A butler actually answered the door, leading them through hallways lined with portraits of stern-looking ancestors. Paige's nerves ratcheted up with every step. The dining room was formal, with a table that could seat 20 but was set for 3. A woman sat at the head, white-haired and sharp-eyed, wearing pearls and an expression of deep skepticism. "Grandmother," Julian kissed her cheek. "This is Paige Morrison. Paige, my grandmother, Julian Reeves, Mrs. Reeves." Paige extended her hand, grateful when her voice came out steady. "Sit." Julian gestured to the chairs. "Let's not waste time on pleasantries. Tell me how you met my grandson, Miss Morrison." Paige glanced at Julian. They'd prepared for this, rehearsed the story. "At a coffee shop." He came in looking completely lost, trying to figure out how to use the ordering system on his phone. I took pity on him and explained it. "I was jet-lagged," Julian added, "and their app interface was terrible." "So you critiqued her coffee shop's technology." Julian's tone was dry. "And she told me if I didn't like it, I could get my overpriced caffeine somewhere else." Julian looked at Paige with something that almost seemed like real affection. "I came back the next day to apologize. It was a good story, built on enough truth that it felt natural." Julian did apparently have opinions about app interfaces, and Paige could absolutely imagine herself telling off a rude customer, billionaire or not. Dinner was an interrogation disguised as conversation. Julian asked about Paige's family, her education, her plans for the cafe. Paige answered honestly, aware that lying to this woman would be immediately obvious. Yes, her father had died when she was 23. Yes, she dropped out of business school to take care of him during his illness. Yes, she'd used her inheritance to buy the cafe instead of finishing her degree. "Why coffee?" Julian asked. "Because my dad and I used to go to cafes every Sunday morning. It was our thing, trying different places, rating the coffee and the atmosphere. After he died, I realized I wanted to create that space for other people. Somewhere comfortable and welcoming, where families could make their own traditions." Something shifted in Julian's expression. "And you're not interested in my grandson's money?" Mrs. Reeves, with respect, "I didn't know who Julian was when we met. I just knew he was a guy who looked like he needed coffee and maybe some sleep." Julian's hand found hers under the table, squeezing gently. It was part of the act, Paige told herself, but his palm was warm and solid against hers. The evening ended with Julian declaring she wanted to see them again soon. In the car on the way home, Paige let out a breath she felt like she'd been holding for hours. You did well, Julian said. She liked you. How can you tell? She looked at me like I was a bug under a microscope. That's her normal expression. If she didn't like you, she would have said so. Bluntly. Back at the penthouse, Paige kicked off her heels and collapsed onto the couch. Julian loosened his tie, poured them both glasses of wine without asking, and sat down beside her instead of at the far end like usual. To surviving dinner with Julian Reeves, he said, raising his glass. To surviving. Paige clinked her glass against his. Does she intimidate everyone like that? She intimidates heads of state. Don't feel bad. They drank in comfortable silence, the lights of the city spreading out below them. Paige found herself studying Julian's profile, the strong line of his jaw, the way exhaustion softened his features slightly. Why don't you actually date? She asked. You're successful, you're not bad-looking. It wouldn't be that hard to find someone real. Not bad-looking. I'm devastated by your enthusiasm. You know what I mean. He was quiet for a long moment. I watched my parents' marriage destroy them both. They loved each other desperately, but they wanted different things. My father wanted to build an empire. My mother wanted a family, stability, presence. Every compromise made them both miserable. They died in a car accident when I was 20, driving home from another fight about his work schedule. Julian, I'm sorry. I swore I'd never do that to someone, never promise something I couldn't deliver. Work is what I know. It's what I'm good at. Romance requires time and attention I can't give. Paige set down her wine glass. That's the saddest thing I've ever heard. It's realistic. It's lonely. He turned to look at her then, really look at her, and Paige felt something shift in the air between them. Maybe. But at least I'm not hurting anyone. The first month passed faster than Paige expected. They fell into a routine of sorts. Julian left for the office before dawn and returned late, usually finding Paige reading in the living room or working on cafe paperwork at the dining table. They'd talk for a few minutes, sometimes longer, conversations that felt surprisingly easy for two people who were essentially strangers. They attended a charity gala where Paige wore a red dress that made Julian's eyes darken when he saw her. He kept his hand on the small of her back all night, guiding her through crowds of wealthy socialites who all seemed to know each other. When reporters asked about their relationship, Julian said simply that Paige made him remember there was life outside boardrooms. The quote made headlines. Julian's mysterious new girlfriend became a topic of speculation in business circles and gossip columns. Sandra fielded dozens of interview requests that they politely declined. You're good at this, Julian said one evening. They were at another family dinner, this time with his aunt and uncle. The acting. Maybe I'm not acting, Paige teased. Maybe I've fallen madly in love with your sparkling personality. My personality has been described as many things. Sparkling isn't one of them. But he smiled when he said it, a real smile that transformed his whole face. Paige felt her heart do that annoying flip again. The problem was, it was getting harder to remember this was fake. Julian brought her coffee from her own cafe every morning, remembering exactly how she liked it. He asked about her day and actually listened to the answers. When she mentioned missing her morning runs, a treadmill appeared in the gym with a note saying he'd noticed she looked restless. Small things. Thoughtful things. Things that felt genuine even though they were supposed to be pretending. Paige found herself noticing things about him too. The way he rubbed his temples when he had a headache but never complained. How he always let her choose what to watch on the rare evenings they spent in. The quiet generosity he showed, like anonymously paying the hospital bills for one of her barista's mothers, thinking Paige wouldn't find out. You're dangerous, Mia said when they met for lunch in the second month. You have that look. What look? The look that says this isn't fake anymore. It's still fake. We have a contract. Paige, honey, contracts don't make your face light up when you talk about him. Does he feel the same way? Paige picked at her salad. It doesn't matter. This ends in a month. He's made it very clear he doesn't do real relationships. People change. Billionaires don't. They get what they want and move on. But even as she said it, Paige wasn't sure she believed it. Julian didn't treat her like an employee or a means to an end. He treated her like someone he genuinely cared about. The shift happened on a Thursday night, 2 weeks before their arrangement was supposed to end. Paige couldn't sleep, restless with thoughts she didn't want to examine. She went to the kitchen for water and found Julian standing at the window, still in his work clothes, staring out at the city. "Can't sleep?" she asked. He turned, surprise flickering across his face. "The Tokyo deal is falling apart. 6 months of work might be for nothing." "I'm sorry." "It's business. It happens." But he looked defeated in a way she'd never seen before. Without thinking, Paige crossed to him, wrapping her arms around him in a hug. He stiffened for a second, then relaxed, his arms coming around her slowly. "Thank you," he murmured into her hair. "For what?" "Being here, being real." They stood like that for a long moment, and Paige felt his heartbeat against her cheek, steady and strong. When she pulled back slightly to look up at him, his eyes were intense on hers. "Paige," he said, her name almost a question. "Yeah, this arrangement. It's been easier than I expected. Because I'm such a good actress, because you're you." His hand came up, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "These past 2 months have been the best I can remember." Her heart was racing. "Julian, what are you saying?" "I don't know. I just know that I don't want this to end." He kissed her then, soft and tentative, giving her every chance to pull away. But Paige didn't pull away. She leaned in, her hands sliding up to his shoulders, kissing him back with all the emotion she'd been trying to deny for weeks. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Julian rested his forehead against hers. "This complicates things, massively. We should probably talk about it, probably. But talking could wait." They kissed again, and Paige let herself fall, knowing she was already in too deep to save herself. The next morning felt different. Paige woke in her own bed, alone, but with the memory of hours spent talking with Julian on the couch, stealing kisses between confessions. He told her about the pressure of living up to his father's legacy, the isolation of always being the smartest person in the room. She told him about the guilt she felt for being relieved when her father finally died after months of suffering, the fear that the cafe would fail and prove everyone who doubted her right. Real things. True things. The kind of things you didn't tell someone you were just pretending with. Julian was in the kitchen when she emerged, attempting to make pancakes and failing spectacularly. Smoke rose from the pan, and he was scowling at it like it had personally offended him. "Need help?" Paige asked, trying not to laugh. "I'm a billionaire. I should be able to make pancakes." "Being rich doesn't give you cooking skills." She rescued breakfast, making proper pancakes while Julian watched, coffee in hand. It was domestic and sweet and terrifying in how much Paige wanted it to be real. "I have meetings all day," Julian said reluctantly, "but tomorrow is Saturday. Come to the office with me. You want me to watch you work. I want to show you what I do, what makes me disappear for 90 hours a week. You should understand what you're signing up for if this," he gestured between them, "becomes real." If. That one word carried so much weight. Saturday morning, Paige rode with Julian to the Reeves Industries Tower in Midtown. The building was glass and steel, modern and imposing. Employees greeted Julian with respect, but also genuine warmth. He stopped to talk to people, asked about their projects, their families. This wasn't the cold corporate tyrant she'd half expected. His office occupied a corner of the top floor, windows on 2 sides providing an incredible view. But what caught Paige's attention was the massive whiteboard covering one wall, filled with diagrams and notes in Julian's sharp handwriting. "This is the Tokyo Project," he explained, gesturing to the board. "We're trying to acquire a Japanese tech company that's developed breakthrough artificial intelligence for medical diagnostics. If we can integrate their technology with our platform, we could help hospitals around the world diagnose diseases faster and more accurately." "That's amazing." "It would be, if they'd agree to sell." He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident. "They don't trust American companies. They think we'll strip the valuable parts and discard the rest." Paige studied the board, the complex web of negotiations and concerns. "What if you don't buy them? What if you partner?" "They've rejected partnership proposals because you were offering partnership on your terms." "What if you offered it on theirs? Let them maintain control, use your platform and distribution network, but keep their company independent. You'd make less money, but you'd get access to the technology and help more people." Julian stared at her. "That could actually work." "Really?" "It's not about the money for them. It's about protecting what they've built, if we approach it as collaboration instead of acquisition." He grabbed his phone, dialing quickly. "Sandra, get me on a call with the Tokyo team. Now." The next 3 hours were a whirlwind of conference calls and strategy sessions. Paige mostly stayed quiet, watching Julian in his element. He was brilliant and decisive, but also willing to listen, to adjust his approach. When he pitched the new partnership structure to the Japanese executives, emphasizing respect and collaboration, she saw their resistance start to crumble. "We'll consider it," the lead executive said finally, which Julian later told her was practically a yes. When the calls ended, Julian pulled Paige to her feet, spinning her around his office. "You're a genius. I just suggested something obvious. Sometimes obvious is what everyone misses. You see things clearly because you're not buried in the details." He kissed her, hard and celebratory. "Thank you. You did all the work. We make a good team." There it was again. We, as in together. As in not temporary. They spent the rest of the day at the office, Julian showing her projects his team was developing. Software to help schools track student progress. A platform for nonprofits to coordinate disaster relief. He made billions, yes, but he also seemed genuinely driven to use technology to solve problems. "I get it now," Paige said as they left that evening. "Why you work so much. It's not just about money or success. It's about impact, reach. I can affect more lives through this work than I ever could as an individual. That doesn't mean you have to sacrifice everything else. I'm starting to understand that." Dinner with a leaner was scheduled for the next evening, and Paige felt more nervous about this one than the first. Things had changed. Whatever was happening between her and Julian was real now, at least for her, and Alina would sense it. They arrived at the mansion to find Alina in her sitting room rather than the formal dining room. She gestured for them to sit, her sharp eyes taking in every detail. "You're different," she said to Julian. "Both of you." "Different how?" Julian asked carefully. "You look at each other differently, like you actually care rather than going through motions." Alina sipped her tea. When did it stop being an act? Paige's heart stopped. Julian's hand found hers, squeezing. "You knew," he asked, "from the beginning." "I didn't build a fortune by being naive, Julian. You hired someone to play your girlfriend. What I didn't expect was for it to become real." "Grandmother, let me finish." "I've watched you work yourself to exhaustion for a decade, using your parents' tragedy as an excuse to avoid living. I knew if I pushed, you'd do something dramatic like hire a fake girlfriend. I was hoping spending time with someone genuine might remind you what actually matters." Paige found her voice. "You manipulated us. I gave you an opportunity. What you did with it was your choice." Alina set down her tea. My stake in the company is yours, Julian. It always was going to be. Robert couldn't run a lemonade stand, let alone a tech empire. But you needed motivation to stop hiding behind work. Julian looked stunned. This whole thing was unnecessary, the arrangement was, but it brought you Paige, so I'd say it was quite necessary. Alina stood. I'm an old woman who won't be around forever. I wanted to see you happy before I go. Now I have. Dinner is served. The meal was surprisingly pleasant, Alina telling stories about Julian's childhood that made him groan and Paige laugh. She saw him differently through these stories, a lonely boy who'd thrown himself into computers because they made sense when people didn't. You've been good for him, Alina said as they were leaving. Don't let him slip back into his workaholic ways. I'll do my best. And Julian, don't be an idiot. Whatever you're paying this girl, it's not enough. In the car, Paige turned to Julian. Did that really just happen? My grandmother orchestrated this entire thing to set me up. Are you angry? He was quiet for a long moment. I should be, but I'm not. If she hadn't pushed, I never would have met you. I would have kept telling myself work was enough. Is it enough? Not anymore. He pulled her close. Paige, I know this started as fake. I know we have 2 weeks left on our contract, but I don't want you to leave. I want to figure out how to make this work for real. Your life is insane. You work constantly, travel internationally, deal with pressure I can't even imagine. I'll cut back. Delegate more. Sandra's been telling me for years I need to trust my team. I don't want you to change who you are. I'm not. I'm becoming who I should have been all along, someone who understands that success means nothing if you're alone. He cupped her face in his hands. I'm falling in love with you, Paige. I might already be there. Tell me I'm not alone in this. Paige's eyes filled with tears. You're not alone. I've been falling for weeks, trying to convince myself it wasn't real. It's real. This is the most real thing I've ever felt. He kissed her, and Paige kissed him back, pouring everything she felt into it. When they finally broke apart, both of them were smiling. The next 2 weeks felt like falling and flying at once. Julian cut his work hours, leaving the office at 7 instead of midnight. They had real dates, dinner at small restaurants where no one recognized them, walks through Central Park holding hands. He came to the cafe and sat in the corner booth, working on his laptop but looking up every few minutes to smile at her. Mia declared it the most romantic thing she'd ever seen and threatened to write a screenplay about it. You realize this is crazy, Paige said one evening. They were cooking dinner together in the penthouse, something that had become a ritual. 2 months ago, I didn't know you existed. Now I can't imagine my life without you in it. That's not crazy. That's how it's supposed to feel when you meet the right person. Do you believe in that? The right person? Julian stirred the pasta sauce, considering. I didn't. I thought it was something people told themselves to justify irrational decisions. But then you walked into my life and made everything make sense. I'm pretty sure you walked into mine. Into my cafe, complaining about the app. Best mistake I ever made. They ate dinner watching the sunset over the city, and Paige felt content in a way she'd never experienced before. This was what happiness felt like. Not the absence of problems or stress, but having someone beside you to face it all with. The contract officially ended on a Tuesday. Paige woke that morning to find Julian already awake watching her. What? She asked, self-conscious. I'm trying to figure out how to convince you to stay. I'm not going anywhere. Your apartment lease is still active. Your stuff is still in boxes in the guest room. We've never actually discussed what happens now. Paige sat up, pulling the sheet with her. They'd been sleeping in Julian's room for the past week, another line crossed without formal discussion. What do you want to happen? I want you to move in for real. Not as part of an arrangement, but because we're together. I want to wake up next to you every morning. I want to come home to you at night. I want to build something real. That's a big step. I know. And if it's too fast, we can slow down. But Paige, I've never been more sure of anything. She thought about her little apartment, the life she'd built alone. It was safe and familiar. But looking at Julian, at the vulnerability in his eyes, she realized safety wasn't what she wanted. She wanted him, the terrifying, beautiful leap into something unknown. "Okay," she said. "Okay. I'll move in, for real this time." His smile was brilliant. "You're sure?" "No, but I want to try." He kissed her deeply. "That's all I need. You willing to try?" They spent the day making it official, Paige unpacking her boxes, finding places for her things among Julian's. It was strange and wonderful, seeing her books on his shelves, her coffee mug beside his in the kitchen, making space for each other in physical ways that mirrored what they were doing emotionally. Sandra called that afternoon with news that the Tokyo partnership was finalized. Julian whooped, picking Paige up and spinning her around. "We did it. This is going to change everything. You did it. I just made a suggestion." "You've been making suggestions since day one, about work-life balance, about partnership over domination, about what actually matters. I've achieved more in the past 2 months than the previous year, and it's because you helped me see clearly." That evening, Julian took her back to the cafe. It was closed, dark except for the street lights outside. He unlocked the door with keys Paige hadn't known he had. "How did you get those?" "Marcus gave them to me. I asked his permission for something." Inside, the cafe had been transformed. Candles everywhere, flowers on every table. Music played softly from somewhere. Paige turned to Julian, confused and overwhelmed. "What is this?" "This is where it all started. Where I met you, where you told me off for criticizing your app, where I started falling in love with you without realizing it." He took her hands. "Paige, I know it's fast. I know we met under unusual circumstances, but I also know that I want forever with you." He dropped to one knee, pulling out a ring box, and Paige's heart stopped. "I'm not asking you to marry me today. We're not there yet, but this is a promise ring. A promise that I'm all in, that I want to build a life with you, that I'll show up every day and choose us." He opened the box, revealing a simple, elegant band. "Will you promise the same? Will you choose us every day?" Paige was crying, nodding, barely able to speak. "Yes, yes, absolutely yes." He slid the ring on her finger, standing to kiss her. It was perfect and overwhelming, and more than she'd ever let herself dream of. "I love you," she whispered against his lips. "I love you too, so much it terrifies me." "Good. Terror means it's real." They stayed at the cafe for hours, dancing to the music, talking about futures that felt possible now. Julian told her about wanting to start a foundation, using his wealth to fund technology education in underserved communities. Paige told him about wanting to expand the cafe, maybe open a second location. "We'll do it together," Julian said. "Whatever you want to build, I'll help however I can. Just don't criticize my apps. No promises." She laughed, and he kissed her again, and Paige felt like her heart might burst from happiness. 6 months later, Paige stood in a leaner's garden at a family barbecue, watching Julian argue good-naturedly with his cousin Robert about baseball. The Tokyo partnership had launched to incredible success, hospitals around the world already implementing the diagnostic technology. Julian had cut his hours to 50 a week, delegating more and trusting his team. He still worked hard, still got absorbed in projects, but now he came home. They had dinner together most nights. He came to the cafe every Sunday morning, their tradition. They'd traveled to Paris for a week, Julian finally taking a vacation that wasn't just flying somewhere for meetings. It wasn't perfect. They argued about his tendency to solve her problems with money when she wanted to handle them herself. She struggled with his fame, the way strangers felt entitled to his attention everywhere they went. But they talked through it, compromised, chose each other every day like they'd promised. "You look happy," Alina said, appearing beside her with a glass of lemonade. "I am, terrifyingly happy." "Good, you've been wonderful for Julian and he for you, I think. He helped me expand the cafe. We opened a second location last month, I also heard he's been learning to bake." Paige laughed. "He's terrible at it, but he keeps trying. That's love, showing up even when you're terrible at something because it matters to the other person." Alina patted her hand. "I won't be around forever, but I'll die happy knowing Julian found someone who sees him. Not his money or his success, but him. He's easy to see, easy to love." Julian caught her eye across the garden, excusing himself to come to her side. His arms slid around her waist automatically like she was a part of him. "Conspiring with my grandmother, absolutely. We're planning your downfall. As long as you're together, I don't stand a chance." Alina wandered off to terrorize Robert, leaving them alone. Julian pulled Paige closer, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Happy?" he asked. "Incredibly. Good, because I have something for you." He pulled out his phone, showing her an email. It was from a major food magazine, asking to feature her cafe in their next issue about emerging culinary entrepreneurs. "Julian, this is huge. How did this happen? I may have mentioned your cafe to a friend who's a food writer. But the rest was all you. They came by, tried your coffee, loved what you've built. You're always doing things like this." "Like what?" "Supporting my dreams, believing in me. That's the easy part. You're incredible, Paige. I just make sure other people know it." She kissed him, not caring that his whole family was watching. "I love you. I love you too." 1 year after they met, Julian took Paige back to the cafe on a Sunday morning. It had become their routine, their sacred time together. They sat in their usual corner booth, coffee and pastries between them, comfortable in the silence. "I have something to ask you," Julian said, and Paige's heart quickened. "Should I be nervous? Maybe." He reached across the table, taking her hand. The promise ring still gleamed on her finger, but he pulled out another ring box, this one different. "A year ago, I hired you to pretend to be my girlfriend. Best business decision I ever made. Technically, your grandmother hired me through Mia. Let me have my moment." He opened the box, revealing a stunning diamond ring. "Paige Morrison, you've turned my life upside down in the best possible way. You've taught me that success means nothing without someone to share it with. That love isn't a distraction from living, it's the whole point. Will you marry me?" For real this time, Paige was crying again, nodding frantically. "Yes. God, yes." He slid the engagement ring onto her finger next to the promise ring, standing to kiss her properly. The cafe erupted in applause, and Paige realized all their friends were there, hiding behind counters and in the kitchen. Mia was sobbing, Marcus was recording on his phone, even Sandra was smiling. "You planned this," Paige accused, laughing through her tears. "I had help." "Say yes one more time so I can hear it." "Yes. 1,000 times yes." They married 6 months later in a small ceremony in Alina's garden, surrounded by friends and family. Paige wore a simple dress, Julian looked incredible in his suit, and Alina cried actual tears that she later denied. The reception was held at their cafe, transformed with flowers and lights. They danced to music that made them laugh, ate cake that Julian had actually helped bake, and toasted to futures that felt brighter together. "I thought I had it all figured out," Julian said in his speech. "I thought success was enough. Then Paige told me I was wrong, and she's been right about everything since. To my wife, who saw through my walls and decided I was worth the effort. To my husband," Paige responded, "who showed me that taking risks can lead to miracles." who loves me fiercely and shows it every day." They kissed while everyone cheered, and Paige felt like the luckiest person alive. 2 years into their marriage, Paige sat in Julian's office at Reeves Industries, reviewing plans for their foundation. They'd officially launched it 6 months ago, funding technology education programs in 50 schools. The results were already incredible. Kids from underserved communities getting access to equipment and training that could change their lives. "We need to expand," Julian said, studying the reports. "Double our reach next year. That's ambitious. We can afford it, and the need is there." Paige's hand went to her stomach, still flat but not for much longer. She'd found out that morning, taken 3 tests to be sure. She'd been waiting for the right moment to tell Julian, but watching him pour his heart into helping kids made her realize the moment was now. "What if we're not just a family of 2 next year?" she asked quietly. He looked up from the papers. "What? What if we're 3, or more eventually?" Understanding dawned on his face, followed by pure joy. "Paige, are you saying I'm pregnant?" He was around the desk in seconds, pulling her to her feet, kissing her senseless. "We're having a baby, we are. Are you ready for this? With you, I'm ready for anything." They told Alina at Sunday dinner, and she actually screamed with excitement. Mia cried. Sandra sent a carefully worded congratulations email that somehow still conveyed genuine emotion. The pregnancy wasn't always easy. Paige was sick for months, exhausted in ways she'd never experienced. But Julian was there, holding her hair, bringing her crackers at 3 a.m., rearranging his schedule to come to every appointment. "You don't have to do all this," Paige said after he'd spent a Saturday assembling nursery furniture. "You have important work. This is my important work. You and our baby. Everything else is just what I do to pay bills. You're a billionaire, you don't need to pay bills. Fine, it's what I do to change the world. But you're my world, Paige. You and this little one." He kissed her belly gently. "Nothing else comes close." Their daughter was born on a Tuesday morning in spring, tiny and perfect and terrifying. Julian cried when he held her, this stoic billionaire reduced to tears by 8 pounds of humanity. "She's beautiful," he whispered. "She looks like you. She has your eyes." They named her Emma Rose, after both their mothers. Bringing her home to the penthouse was surreal, this tiny person who was entirely dependent on them. Julian threw himself into fatherhood with the same intensity he'd once reserved for work. He learned to change diapers, to swaddle, to soothe Emma when she cried. He cut his work hours even more, rarely going to the office before 9 or staying past 5. "Your board is going to revolt," Paige said when Emma was 3 months old. "Let them try. I have the majority share, and more importantly, I have this." He gestured to the scene before them, Paige feeding Emma on the couch, messy and chaotic and perfect. "This is what matters. No regrets about the life you had before. Before you, I was existing. Now I'm living. There's a difference." Emma was 6 months old when Paige suggested they move out of the penthouse. "I love it here, but I want Emma to grow up with a backyard, space to run and play." They found a house in Westchester, close enough for Julian to commute, but with land and trees and room for Emma to grow. It was strange leaving the penthouse where they'd fallen in love, but also right. They were building something new. The cafe continued to thrive. Paige had opened 3 more locations, each one successful. She'd stepped back from daily operations, trusting her managers, focusing on strategy and growth. Julian's foundation now operated in 200 schools. The Tokyo partnership had spawned 5 more international collaborations. They were building empires together, but more importantly, they were building a family. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Julian took Paige back to Alina's mansion. His grandmother had passed away the previous year, peacefully in her sleep. leaving the house to them. "I can't believe it's been 6 years since I hired you," Julian said as they walked through the garden where they'd married. "Best $55,000 you ever spent. I would have paid millions, billions, everything I have. Good thing I agreed to your counteroffer then." He pulled her close, his arms around her waist. Emma was with Mia for the night, giving them rare time alone. "Remember when you asked if I believed in the right person? You said you didn't, until me. I was wrong. I did believe, I was just afraid. Afraid I'd mess it up, afraid I'd hurt someone, afraid I'd turn into my father and put work above everything else." He kissed her softly. "You showed me a different way. That love doesn't make you weak, it makes you stronger. That I could have it all if I was willing to fight for it. We both fought for it, and we won. Every day we win." They stood in the garden as the sun set, talking about the future, about giving Emma siblings, about expanding the foundation, about traveling as a family, about all the possibilities ahead of them. "You ever miss it?" Paige asked. "The simplicity of before, when you could just work and not worry about anything else. Never. That wasn't simplicity, it was emptiness. This," he gestured to encompass everything they'd built, "is complex and messy and occasionally exhausting, but it's full, rich, meaningful. You've become philosophical in your old age. I'm 38, not ancient. Tell that to your back when you pick up Emma." He laughed, spinning her around like he had that night in his office years ago. "I love you, Paige Reeves. Thank you for agreeing to a fake relationship that became the most real thing in my life. I love you too. Thank you for being worth falling for." They kissed as the stars came out, in the garden where they'd promised forever to each other, surrounded by the life they'd built from a lie that became truth. It had started as pretend, two strangers playing roles for money and family approval. But somewhere between dinner with a leaner and late-night conversations and choosing each other every day, it had transformed into something genuine and lasting. Emma's laughter echoed in their home every day. The cafe continued to expand. The foundation touched thousands of lives. Julian still worked hard, but he came home every night. They still had their Sunday mornings at the cafe, a tradition that would outlast them. It wasn't perfect. Nothing ever was. They fought about small things and occasionally big things. Life threw challenges at them, stress and pressure and exhaustion. But they faced it together, partners in every sense of the word. Years later, when Emma asked how they'd met, Paige and Julian exchanged a look. They'd agreed to tell her the truth someday, but for now they told her the story they'd invented. "Your father was terrible at ordering coffee," Paige said. "Your mother took pity on me," Julian added. "And then what happened?" Emma asked, her gray eyes wide. "Then we fell in love," they said together. And that part, at least, was completely true. What had started as an arrangement, a business transaction, had become the foundation of everything they valued. The fake relationship had made it real because they'd chosen to let it. They'd been vulnerable and honest and brave enough to admit what they felt. Paige often thought about that first night, standing in Julian's empty penthouse, wondering what she'd gotten herself into. If she could go back and tell herself then what was coming, she wouldn't. The not knowing had been part of the magic. The gradual unfolding of feelings, the surprise of genuine connection, the choice to keep choosing each other. Julian proposed to her again every anniversary, pulling out the same ring box, asking the same question. And every year, Paige said yes, laughing and crying, as in love with him as she'd been that Sunday morning in the cafe. Their story wasn't conventional. It didn't follow the traditional path of meeting, dating, falling in love in predictable stages. But it was theirs, and it was real, and it was exactly what both of them needed. Sometimes the best things in life came from unexpected places. From agreeing to something crazy for practical reasons. From being open to possibilities you'd never considered. From letting a fake arrangement become startlingly, beautifully real. Paige and Julian had found their forever in the most unlikely way, and they'd built a life together that exceeded anything either of them had imagined. They'd taken a risk on something that seemed impossible, and turned it into the most certain thing in their lives. And every morning when they woke up next to each other, every Sunday when they shared coffee in their corner booth, every time Julian came home and swept her into his arms, every time Emma called for both of them and they went together, they knew without question that they'd made the right choice. The fake had become real, and the real was everything.